If you want news and rumors that appeal, welcome to the Dusty Wheel. If you want news and rumors.
Hey, welcome back to the Dusty Wheel. I'm your host, the Innkeeper, and this is our live call-in talk show all about the Wheel of Time. Now, tonight's a little bit different because I'm running the show by myself. But before I introduce my guest tonight, I want to remind everybody what we have coming up. So, if you remember, this Saturday, we're talking all about sex and the Wheel of Time TV show. What should or shouldn't we see? We'll have Lesbian Nerdy Ebony from Dragon Mountain and Nameless. This is going to be a YouTuber's paradise of sex. That sounds weird. Let's not say it that way again. So next Watt Wednesday, we have Sarah Nakamura, Daniel Green. They're going to be here with me, and we're going to be playing the Wheel of Game Time. It's a lot of fun. It's just a casual, ridiculous evening with two friends, just chatting about the Wheel of Time. You know how it is. And then the following Watt Wednesday, we're going to have another episode of Robert Jordan's Notes. Yes, that's right. Robert Jordan's Notes, episode 2. We're still narrowing down what that topic is. We'll announce that to you here in the coming days. But it's going to be a lot of fun. If you haven't seen the first one, go check it out on our channel. Now, okay, those are all of our announcements. Taylor, if you're watching, I think we just retired you. No, I'm just kidding. Looking forward to you coming back. But without further ado, let's get to tonight's topic and guest. Let me welcome to my show my friend, Kristy Lussier. Hey, Kristy, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you guys?
We're doing awesome over here. You know how it was. You saw the behind the scenes scramble here. That was always fun, right?
I'm an independent filmmaker. I know what it's like to have technical difficulties everywhere you go.
Right. So now the reason we're doing this is I know you've seen at least one episode of our live adaptations that we've done on the channel before.
Yes.
And we just kind of play this, cut and keep, and I don't know, it's cut and keep and kill. Sometimes we have kind of weird names for it. But we thought to ourselves, maybe we should find out how adaptations really work. And now, before we jump into that piece, before people start asking questions, I have lots of questions myself. What I thought we'd do is just kind of talk about your experience a little bit and how we know each other. Now, I've introduced you coming in as a guest as being part of Team Moiraine before. And so I don't know if you want to explain what is Team Moiraine? What is that all about? And how does that lead into us knowing each other?
Okay, so, I just saw Sarah on the chat. She's amazing. Anyway, Team Moiraine. So, well, first off, we know each other through JordanCon. So we'll get that out of the way. We met JordanCon year 1. We're a couple of OGs of JordanCon. So
that's right. That is correct.
That is correct. But the name Team Moiraine came from, so if people haven't already figured it out, which you probably already know, Sarah Nakamura is my best friend, and she's been my best friend for 20 years. And we bonded over something that was not even Wheel of Time related. And then she basically kind of threw the book at me way back in 1999. And she said, we can't be friends until you read this book first. And so that was Eye of the World. And I've been hooked ever since. So
now it's funny that you say she threw the book at you, because I believe, if I remember correctly, didn't her brother throw the book at her? So she's just passing it on. Way to pass that on, Sarah.
That's exactly what happened. She did it because her brother did it to her. So she's like, I'm passing on this tradition of literally throwing the book at you.
I feel like this is a thing. I'm not recommending anyone throw Wheel of Time books at each other or their best friends.
No, particularly not the hardcovers. Come on.
But it's clearly worked. It worked for both of you. That's good.
It did. And so,
you both, now I learned of Team Moiraine because you both crashed my Looney Theories panel at JordanCon.
Oh
And
yeah. Yeah.
that's kind of I have this stark memory of you coming in, and pretty much I think it was, you turned it into almost like a drinking game. I think that's what happened. The first year I was like, this is going to be amazing, and it turned into, which it was amazing. It was amazing for a little bit different reasons, but it was still amazing.
It was amazing. Well, I have to give a little credit and thank the Theorylanders, because they were the reason that Team Moraine really even came about. I mean, let's kind of let the cat out of the bag here, because Sarah and I earlier in the day had attended that panel, and it was a discussion obviously about Moraine, and there was a huge argument between myself and Sarah versus every Theorylander about how Moraine was a damsel in distress. And if anybody has ever talked to Sarah or myself, but more her, they know that those are fighting words. You don't say that. So yeah, we kind of went down that road of everything was like, oh wait, hold on, let Team Moraine talk. That's how we got the name. So thank you, Theorylanders, because
yes, look at that. I did not realize we could credit Theoryland. Well done, my fellow Theorylanders. I appreciate you bringing us Team Moraine.
Yep.
Like, you got a book was thrown at you, and then people picked on Moraine, and here we are.
And then we crashed your panel, and then here we are, because that's how Sarah and I roll. We kind of just walk in and we're like, hey, we're here. Let's talk about some fun books. So, yeah.
I love it. I love it. So now a little bit about your experience before we kind of get into what I'm kind of returning or calling real adaptations from book to screen for dummies, because that's what I am in this regard. I know nothing about the industry. Tell our viewers a little bit about your experience as a writer and filmmaker. Okay.
So I would be what you classify as kind of an independent filmmaker. However, I've had industry experience for a number of years, starting way back from when I was a kid, and being able to be on large movie sets as an extra. The first director I ever met in Hollywood was Oliver Stone. I was an extra in Natural Born Killers, if anybody is familiar with the film.
Nice.
So that was kind of my first foray into, I really want to do this. And started writing ever since. And writing is kind of my passion. Screenwriting has always been something that's been very close to my heart. And then as time has gone on and years have gone on, it's been, I've been very, very fortunate and blessed to not only be able to kind of work on film sets as a production assistant, in catering, in props, in whatever kind of aspect, being an extra, being on film as an actor per se. But then as you get older and you're not necessarily directly in the industry, the pool of independent filmmakers, we kind of now have our own culture. And because it's so easy now to get access where you're online and you can put your content out and you can connect with people directly in the industry, which was not plausible even 15, 20 years ago. It's easier now to get more education, to kind of get more involved and be a part of what we consider the industry without actually living in Los Angeles and working directly in something. And so
right.
My experience, probably even more recently in the last 10 years or so, has been a lot of independent filmmaking. I am a screenwriter. I have had scripts optioned. I do work for a screenwriting service, just kind of started this year as a consultant, where I'm a script doctor, and they send us our scripts and we clean them up and we help them fix them and kind of go from there. So that's a little bit of my background. I'm short films, screenplays, adaptations. I've done a plethora and a number of things, and I've been very, very, again, fortunate just to kind of meet some wonderful people, learn a lot, travel, go to film festivals, go to film conventions, screenwriting conventions, meet connections, and grow in kind of my craft from there. So
I love that you've, the gamut. You've run the gamut.
Yes.
And that's because that's a lot about what we're going to talk about tonight, which is what are all the pieces in this industry when it comes to adapting books to television or movies. And I know you probably thought about this a lot just because of your connection to the Wheel of Time itself and fandom. And I'm assuming, I feel like I don't have to ask this. You're excited about the adaptation coming on Amazon, I'm sure.
Absolutely. This is for fans like us who have been, 20, 30 years in the making. We've been waiting for this for a long time. And I'm extremely excited. I cannot wait to see what they come up with. I'm not working on the show and I'm not writing on the show. So it's just going to be, I'm just as excited and kind of like ready to see what it looks like and what kind of comes to be. I'm really stoked. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, let's jump into this. This is what everyone's here for. I'm sure that the chat's going to have a lot of questions. For those of you that are watching us either on Facebook, Twitter, or if you're here with us, just remember to give us a like on the video. That way other fans will know to find this video while it's live and find it afterwards. And if you're new to us, hopefully you enjoy this kind of weekly live Wheel of Time content, and subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it. So now let's jump into this. We'll open the phone lines for those of you that are kind of curious, want to give us a call. We'll open the phone lines for you probably in about 20 minutes, but I want to get to some of the questions I have. Now, this is going to go all over the place, and like I said, I'll try to pull some questions in from chat because, like I said before, we kind of took a fan view of this, which is we, of course, want everything and what would be willing to cut, and that's pretty much how we've done live adaptations around here. Right. But as I imagine, like when I'm jumping into this, one of the main big questions that came to me that I wanted to ask you was, how do showrunners, whoever's about to adapt a book to TV and to film, how do they know what to write without knowing what their budget is? In other words, I would imagine, you want to include everything. How do you know exactly what you can adapt based on without knowing the budget, or is it you always know the budget first? So right. I wanted to throw that to you. Kind of, how do you make those decisions, or is it kind of an industry standard rule of thumb? You know your budget, or you don't.
Every showrunner would love to say that they know their budget ahead of time, but sometimes that's not necessarily the case. And like a good example would be actually for the Wheel of Time, Rafe and the team behind kind of getting that all together, and Sarah being a part of, we've got to put a series Bible together, which I'll get back to series Bible in a second. They ultimately, at the end of the day, didn't necessarily know what that final number for the budget was going to be, but it's a tremendous kind of honor and yet task to take on. Okay, how do we flesh out this narrative that we are basically knowing that we're going to tell this story, but basically also knowing we're not going to have $500 million to $1 billion to do this. And if clearly, obviously, us Wheel of Time fans know that we could spend $1 billion and still not even do this series justice. Yeah, it's never going to be enough. So I think, kind of if it was something like we're kind of moving into this process of, okay, we're getting ready to pitch this so that we can bring this to kind of some distributors and production houses that we know we would like to get budget from and have them be kind of our distribution channel. And they're going to help us move forward with getting production done. You really kind of have to take into account how to sharpen that narrative. But first and foremost, you have to find the most important element, which is what exactly is that key narrative? What is this storytelling? What exactly are we trying to do here? And fleshing that out and cleaning that up and putting that down into, okay, now we can do kind of a series Bible, and then we can do a season Bible. And that's just even doing season 1. This is what it would look like. These are the 2 books we pull from, or 3 books we pull from, and kind of going from there.
So I'm kind of curious about that. Is it like Kickstarter, where it's like this is the narrative, this is what we want to tell.
Yeah.
If we have more budget, this is additional things we'd like to. Is it more things you'd like to tell in the story, or is it just more bang for your buck that you'd like to get about the story you're telling, or is it a little bit of both sometimes?
I think it's really a little bit of both, but I really think it honestly depends on the showrunner and that writing team that you get into that writing room. And for somebody like Rafe, who 100% just loves this content and he loves this series, I believe in my heart for him, that was, I want these story points. I want to tell this good narrative. And that was kind of probably the key factor driving, this is how I develop my team. This is how I put my writing room together. And then kind of going from there. It's a fantasy series. You know that you're going to need a large budget. I mean, you know that. But
what's your take on that piece? You just brought up this idea, Rafe or whatever showrunner out there, since we're both not on the crew over there, but we always think about Rafe. But any showrunner, and Brandon's commented on this before, where he'd rather someone with a vision than just somebody doing page for page adaptations. Where do you stand on that? Having been part of this process, do you prefer someone coming in with a vision, or do you actually prefer them staying really close to the source material and giving us mostly what we have, if not everything we have in a book?
In a book. I think the vision is probably the bigger key in having that vision. And essentially, again, that boils back down to that original question is, what is the story that we're telling and whose story are we telling? And then you kind of build off of that. So having that vision, knowing the theme, the tone, and the message that you want to convey through that, and having that vision on how to kind of make that happen, that's a bigger factor, and I think a more successful factor to take into play than considering like, I just want to pull everything and put everything from the books and get a lot of money to do it. Reality is showrunners know that's not going to happen. They know that they're not going to be able to do everything. So
I'm kind of curious, going back to that question, series Bible.
Yes.
Can you explain? So, I mean, I feel like I get it, basically what that suggests to me, what that is, but can you just summarize what that is for our viewers? What's a series Bible, and then a season Bible, which I think is probably something similar, but yeah.
Sure. So the series Bible, well, first off, everybody kind of references a Bible knowing that the Bible is the bulk and tell all be all with these kind of chapters in these books that outlines kind of the story of how things go. And so a series Bible is really putting together overall, like, this is the show we want to do. And we know from point A to point Z, this is kind of what it's going to look like. And a series Bible can be anything from 30 up to 100 and something pages. I mean, it's a mega document that you really, really put a lot of thought and detail into. This is kind of the art direction that we want to go. You outline and break down the main characters. You talk about how you'd structure and arc out each season and how that narrative would play out. You're basically kind of putting that whole thing together. So in like simplest terms, if you're standing on set and you hand somebody the series Bible or a season Bible, they could pick it up, look at it, and know, okay, this is what we're doing, and not be lost. So it's this huge guide. It's this huge manifest to kind of guide you through your narrative, essentially.
Is that a living document, or can you go back and see what the series Bible was and then come back later and be like, we totally went far away from it? Or is it constantly being modified as things change?
Oh, constantly. I mean, depending on if you're kind of doing like more of a stronger series breakdown for something like the Wheel of Time, I would assume, and probably can pretty much say that I know they're probably doing season by season, because that kind of keeps them in line with what they're working on. But yeah, it's organic. It's extremely organic. It's ever changing, ever flowing, because you're always going to get new directors who come in. You're going to get new writers who come into the writing room. Sure, But also, once your show goes on the air, there's a strong chance that what you thought was a strong narrative doesn't necessarily play out with the viewership, or the audience isn't connecting to it. Yeah. Or another character who you never thought would actually pick up and become as big as they do. And so now the writers are tasked with, well, we might go in a different direction with this. And that's essentially what happens. So it's always organic, always changing, always shifting. But it's pretty solid in a sense of, we know what we've got to get done, because this is kind of our outline, and then you fill in from there. So
sure. Well, and one of our viewers, Noel, had a question, which I think touches on all of this. Do show budgets and other producers' vision have a significant impact on the structure of the scripts? And I would assume what ends up being the series Bible. How often is it, this is the Bible until we get budget and other producers get involved, and all of a sudden you have a new Bible? Is that just the reality, or is that?
It's just the reality.
Okay.
The producers are always, again, just ever a part of that process of how things shift and change. And again, you'll have different producers each season. You'll have different producers for each episode. It truly just depends. There might be producers who come in and have kind of an idea and a vision of how they'd like something else to go, or they feel like this character could go in this way. Producers are like, they are this really interesting element to how projects move forward, whether it's a series or a film. Executive producers are the ones that really are kind of those like top line bigwigs that are like, we don't want to do that. Now you have to figure out how to fix it.
Right.
Producers, in a sense, they're more on the level of like, well, we're kind of dealing with this, but we fix this and do that, but maybe I'm thinking this. And then they talk with whoever, the showrunner, the director, the writer, whoever, and they work through kind of those elements of moving forward and kind of what they see for the show or for the next episode, really.
So in this case, when you said that you have often multiple producers, is that just part of somebody losing their job, moving on? Is it season by season? Producers just come and go, or how typical is it maybe the producer sticks around for the entire show?
It really ultimately depends. There are different seasons where producers stay on through the whole series because it is a project that's important to them. That's kind of they're a part of that whole process of this is kind of my content and I'm a part of it. A prime example is something like an Aaron Sorkin show where he's clearly always executive producer, has been showrunner or lead writer in the room, but he might part from a series at like season 4, season 5, and then you see some other executive producers come in and some other producers kind of shift into taking over. And you also have to think of how scheduling works in terms of how they kind of schedule filming. So one show might be in production at the time and shooting and going, and then another might be kind of on hiatus. And one producer's working on one show and they can't make the schedule work to go back to another show or vice versa. And so they're not working on that show or come back to episode 5 because they've been on another series. It's really interesting to see kind of how it works. It's again, a very organic kind of process when you're dealing with an episodic television show versus a film, for example. So people kind of are ever changing, but there are people who are tried and true and they stay through the whole thing. Anybody who knows the DC TV universe of Arrow and the Flash and stuff. I mean, there are a couple of people, Greg Berlanti and Guggenheim and everybody, they've been there from the start and they are on every show and they are part of every process and every decision. It just kind of depends. It really does.
Yeah, it's interesting. So is that something as fans that we should expect, which is to see a series that's been shaped, we'll say Rafe, we'll often say Rafe, this is Rafe, but the reality, it sounds like to me, I'm a dummy in this regard. I don't know anything about this industry, but it sounds like basically the vision is also shaped by a variety of other players here, and that final adaptation, and because this goes back to something that Rafe said, which is to protect the spine and the heart, basically, of the series, like a protective role because of all these maybe not competing visions, but or maybe competing visions of what is successful and what isn't successful about the adaptation.
Sure. So, yeah. That's why a showrunner is crucial and very key, because they pretty much are, they're exactly what Rafe said. They are ultimately that, I've got to be the gatekeeper of this because I know everyone's going to have their own opinion or A, B, C, D. So, he's 100% right. It's a crucial position. But sometimes you may get lucky, or sometimes a show just kind of finds that vibe where they pull in that group of people, whether it's a key group of writers and a key group of producers, and those people just get onto the same wavelength essentially, and they are the heart and that spine of that show, and they all carry it through, and they might disagree about a few things, but they essentially all get, we're all kind of on that same, we've got that same energy and we work together well. So this is now kind of our thing, and they move it forward.
And I think that's probably, and I don't want to jump onto another topic here, but I think that's probably where the fans, I get a little bit of trepidation from fans and myself, which is if they don't have a vision of the depth of the Wheel of Time and kind of what its themes are and what it's really meant to be, what Jordan made it into, that even the showrunner, and obviously it's fantastic that we have a fan and somebody that cares about that, but even then it'd be really nice if some of the producers and directors and such also caught the vision. So, and I guess that's probably what Series Bible is probably helpful for, and all of the consultants, you know, Sarah as part of the show, and Rafe really trying to sell this vision of what it is. So in the writer's room and in the producers, and so there's a shared vision across, and that makes a lot more sense to me. I don't think I had thought about it that way, so I appreciate that. I kind of wanted to jump to the actual aspect of writing in an adaptation, you know, making choices, unlike how we made the choices. And I want to remind everybody, I'll open the call lines. If you have, I don't want to hog all of Kristy's time here. I will, but if you want to give us a call, it's 1-313-825-5968. That's 1-313-825-5968. I think that you should be able to see that on your screens now. As I'm running the show by myself here. But yeah, again, you can give us a call if you have a question for Kristy about kind of how this works. We're happy to answer that question. But I want to jump into this idea of making choices. How do you go about, what is involved? What are the factors that a showrunner, anyone that's adapting material, is looking at from a professional standpoint when they make a decision to keep a plot, a character, a location, whatever it is, a certain setting of the book? What is it that they're going through? Can you kind of just start listing off, and we'll kind of pick at them, but maybe just pick the top one in your mind. Like, what are the considerations they make from a professional standpoint when making these decisions?
Well, number one, and I briefly mentioned it earlier, it's those narrative arcs. So knowing who your number one protagonist is, and what journey that you want to take them on. And then knowing that narrative that they are going to go through or that you want to take them through, and really recognizing that and making sure that that's key. And whose story you're telling, essentially. So while we all want to see everybody that we want to see on screen, there's a strong chance that we won't. And, you know, the questions that come up when writers are working through those problems or those situations is, you know, is this character key to drive that narrative arc? Is this character important when down the road? Is this furthering the story? Is this furthering the motivation of the character or the plot? Is this helping get to a conflict resolution element? Those are the kinds of things that they really think about when, are we going to cut this? Do we keep this? Those kinds of things. And another really tough part about adaptation in this regard is that we even as writers, but certainly as fans, we are very, very emotionally attached to these characters, and we kind of know their forward-thinking process already. So we're trying to, as a writing team, you would be thinking, we really need to break the habit of thinking long-term. Even though we know that we've got a basic kind of outline of where it's going to go, you really have to kind of step back and go, but we're right here. And so we need to understand that if we were a general audience member and didn't have this original content and didn't know this original story, how do we take that audience through the journey without thinking that the audience is going to know what happens 6, 7, 8 episodes or 2 seasons down the road? So as a writer, you're actually retelling the story, and you are going through that journey with the audience as you move forward in that process. It's really tough to do. It really is, because either A, you want to know where you want your character to go, or B, because again, we're dealing with content that we already have. We go, okay, well, this really happens down the road, so we can't do that. But can we? You know?
I'm kind of curious about that. So, okay, I can see that process happening, which is, you know, pulling back away from everything you know,
right?
Adapting material, kind of creating character arcs, and thinking about driving certain character arcs. When do you select in your mind, for example, this role needs a big star versus this role needs a nobody, you know, or an unknown? I shouldn't say nobody. And how do you, and when you make that choice, is it a budget consideration, or is it just an acting, like we need someone with the acting chops, or is it we need somebody that brings an audience and can carry a show?
Sure. I think actually at any given time, it's all of the above. I think that there are moments that because we know a character is so key and so crucial that they don't want to go out and get a huge actor that's already known and known for many roles. They want to bring this character to life and create this character from scratch. And they want to bring on an actor who has that raw, just beauty about the character already that they can see through an audition process. And they know this actor is the person to help us bring that, regardless of budget or if they have a name or not. Usually they tend to want to put unknown actors in those kinds of roles. These are the roles that launch people. And they know that. They want to launch people. Bigger, crucial roles like, let's say, Moraine.
Moraine, yeah, that's a good one.
I mean, you know, that's a given. I think we all even know as a fandom that if they were going to put a lead star in any role, it was going to be her.
Sure.
Because while we feel like she's extremely huge and important, she really is not necessarily the protagonist that we're telling the story about. It's not necessarily her story. I would maybe think Eye of the World and Into Great Hunt could be. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this is Rand's story. And so that would be a role that you really want to maybe draw in some star power and have somebody that has kind of a name.
So when it comes to that, let's say you want a named actor, or even in this case, maybe an unknown, but you have a certain amount of time you need them for. When do you know you're justified to bring a character into a season that has a key role? Let's say, I'm gonna be very specific here. Let's look at Camelin, because all the fans are kind of wondering, right?
Yeah,
like
for
Elaine,
sure.
Morghese, Alaida,
Right.
Gawain, Galad. We don't know who they are yet. So those are five actors.
Right.
How much screen time would you say justifies hiring them for a season and contracting 5 different actors? How much screen time in that season to you would justify that kind of budget in an adaptation? Because I would imagine that is a decision that's being made or would have to be made.
Sure. You know, it's really tough because I'm kind of trying to put the hat of industry perspective on, but then I know fan wise, why it's so significant.
Sure.
I mean, clearly, obviously, but you know, I feel like it just really depends on where they have taken the story in the first season. And if it's something that they're going to introduce into season 2 or season 3, they're going to wait until that season, and that's going to be part of that season's budget, and they're going to be prepping for that beforehand. Or, you know, they could do something where they put out a little carrot and we see a glimpse of one of those characters and say the season before or the end of season 1, and we know that character's coming. And you write it that it's just so tasty enough for the audience to attach and want to know who this person is and why they're important. And that draws that audience back in, you know, coming back to season 2 to see okay, how's this going to play out? I think for the fans, that's what's tasty about it for us, is that we want to see those characters. But I love the fact of seeing them for a second and then they're gone, and then you know they're coming, but you just don't get it all at once. That's just, I love that aspect. And I think they're going to do a lot of that with the show. I really hope they do.
Yeah, and that's what I brought up, and it's not a question you can really answer for this showrunner and this show. But it's more to you as a professional, you know, looking at this, if you were making that decision, does it come down to how much screen time it would translate into as far as value? Is it dollars per minute they're on screen, or is it more so this is an important part of the character arc, so we're going to hire them even though they're only on screen for 5 minutes an entire season? We're gonna hold on to them at least because we know they play a role later on. I mean, is 5 minutes enough in a season to want to hold an actor over, or would you push them, if you were adapting, would you push them into season 2 where you knew they had a larger role? So
the key thing to remember here is it depends on, again, the actor. And when you're dealing with SAG, so the Screen Actors Guild, for example, there's guidelines and structures that you have to follow when it comes to how you pay them. And it really does boil down to screen time. And it does boil down to how much you would need that person for production. So for example, if there's this huge star that we want to use for a role, but we want to give a glimpse of them in the end of season 1, and then we don't actually see them fully until season 2. We can pay the star and we can offer a certain amount as part of that rollover into season 2 and as part of the contract. But you're essentially really only paying that actor to be there for a few days to make that appearance, and then they're gone. It's not like you're giving them a huge chunk. You're paying them for their time, their hours on set, following kind of a lot of those SAG guidelines, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, you kind of really have to think like budget wise, hey, we've written this character in, and they're coming to make an appearance in whatever. So we know we've got to have a little bit of that chunk of budget from season 1, because again, that character's rolling over into season 2, but that might be a whole different kind of contract setup, how they come back into the next season. It
Right.
depends on production days, when you're shooting, how long you would again need them, because episodes might not be written. You still might be in the writing process. You don't know how long they're going to be on screen. But it's really smart to think that, or it's a good thing to think, actors really are paid for screen time. They are paid for how many pages they need to be there and how many pages that costs for them to be shooting and on screen in terms of days that you need them to film, essentially.
Okay, so before I have a caller come in, I'm going to narrow this. I'm going to go one more step on this very narrow question that I have, which is, if you were adapting, let's put you in Rafe's position. You've adapted. You know how the Eye of the World takes place. You know what's going on. You know what's coming in the Great Hunt. You know what's coming in the Dragon Reborn.
Sure.
You know the significant players in the book, and you know that 5 of these characters, that are very key later on, will show up much more in the Great Hunt and the Dragon Reborn and moving on.
Right.
And in this case, you know that they only show up, let's give them half. At the most, they'd be part of 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes of one episode in one season. Would you want to have them? I mean, you as having the fan hat and the showrunner hat, would you still want them in this season and say season 2, or would you push them off to season 2? And we're talking about the 5 from Camelin.
I'd want them in season 1 for sure. That's how you hook an audience. That's really how you kind of get the audience to understand that you're world building even as you're writing the show. And there is significance to a character that you introduce in a special way, and you know it's significant, even if it's minimal in that season or that episode. I personally, for me, if it was me, I'd want the little tidbits. I'd want the little morsels. I want the carrot, essentially, that you see this character and we get their introduction, but we're not diving into that story yet. You know it's coming. And good writers build to that. Good writers lead up to that. You've seen it kind of coming, that you're leading up to that point, and then afterwards, good writers know, all right, we've left the carrot and now the audience is salivating. They want to see what's coming next. So
they want it back.
Yeah. I want cool things. I love cliffhangers. I love cliffhangers. Even though I hate them, I love them because they work and they're so good, and you latch on and you sink your teeth in, and that's how an audience comes back. We don't necessarily live and consume content the way you and I probably did 15, 20, 30 years ago, again, where we had to wait a whole week to see something, or,
right.
A whole season. If it was like, here's the season finale and then here's the cliffhanger, we're waiting 4 months to see something. We don't really necessarily live in that anymore. So you really have to find these ways to connect and attach the audience that they will come back for that next season. And I think building into that and putting those kind of elements and those little carrots is what does it, really. Okay.
I mean, it seemed it was a mix of fan and producer there. I feel like it definitely, from a fan perspective, I want everything, and I think that's it's a difficult decision. I think that one, to me, Camelin and
see everything.
There. Yeah. Let's bring in our first caller. It's Andrew. Andrew, welcome to the Dusty Wheel. How you doing?
Pretty good, yourself?
Fantastic.
Hi.
So what's
I
your
got a question for you. My question's for Kristy. If there's one scene in the Wheel of Time books, and any of the books that you could write for the TV series, which scene and why?
From the whole series, or like book 1 and 2?
No. From the whole series.
The whole series. Geez.
Oh, dude, that's.
We should probably say this really quick to our viewers. This might involve spoilers. Up to this point, there really haven't been any, so I'm not going to throw a spoiler banner up. We will, but yeah, just know that there could be a spoiler here. And knowing that, I don't want to change your mind, Kristy, about what you're about to say, but maybe not the last scene. I guess you can just tell us generally.
I don't even know if I could write that because I'd be like crying. Let's make it simple. Be a small
scene. It could be a great scene, or it could be a small scene, something that just clicked with you maybe it's because of your job that you would see it differently, or you would love to see it adapted, that most of us as fans may say, oh yeah, we wouldn't think of that.
Yeah. So. Well, I'm going to make it a little easier. I'm actually going to pull from book 1. I'm just going to make it a little, because there's no way that I can go. I mean, there's a ton of scenes that I can think of. Fires of Heaven, obviously, clearly the scene at the end. I mean, with Moraine, that would be one. I also like Shadow Rising is my favorite book, and there's so many good scenes in that book. Like, I would want to write that whole that whole season. If it was a season, I want to write that one. Like, I would do that. But I'm going to say that probably one of my favorite scenes it's actually not in Eye of the World. It's in The Great Hunt. It's when Rand first meets Siuan. And when he first goes into the room and Lan is kind of like prepping him and making him, like, okay, do this, do that, whatever. And then he goes in and he meets her for the first time. I love that scene. I love it. And if I could write that, you don't even know. Like, I would just, that's probably one of my favorite scenes, is when he first meets Siuan. And also End of Eye of the World. I love when Moraine's looking down on him and he's practicing with Lan, sword fighting, and doing whatever. I can't even think right now. And she's kind of, dangling her jewel, and she's saying, he's the Dragon Reborn, like, or whatever. Spoiler, sorry. I love that moment. That moment is so awesome. And I would have even used that as like a season cliffhanger kind of thing for me personally. I love that moment. So those are the two that probably Great Hunt and Eye of the World I would really want to do. Yeah.
I like those. And those of you that are watching in chat, if you're over here on YouTube, if you're watching us Facebook and Twitter, you can reply there. I'm kind of curious if you could adapt, and not only adapt, but be the writer of that scene. Let me see it in chat. What scene would you pick if you could be in that writer's room? That's a really interesting question.
That's a great
I have a hard
question.
time answering that question. Hey, Andrew, thank you so much for calling, man. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Always awesome to hear from you. Have a good night, okay? Yep. Yeah, that's a good question. Everyone's had so many questions in chat. I probably missed them.
I know, there's a ton.
There's so much chatter going on that I'm trying to grab little pieces out. So if there was another question you had in chat for Kristy, feel free to post it again. I will try to get to it. I just see
Sarah like typing a bunch of stuff, and I just love her so much. Like, I just miss her so much. You guys don't even know. Like, seriously. I'm so proud of her, and it is amazing what she is doing. And this is kind of how the industry works. I'm just going to jump in really quick, Matt, because I got to
go for it.
It's basically like Sarah has gone into witness protection in my mind. Like, I have not been able to talk to her or have the friendship that we've had before, because I know how important what she's doing is. And when you're kind of in this industry and you're working on something that's this kind of secretive, you really kind of have to cut off even from your family and friends. You can't just even slip on something or say something. And she's just amazing. And I haven't been able to talk to her in so long, because I know she's been working on the show, and I'm like so excited. So I just see her typing over on the side, and I love you, Sarah.
That's I like that. I like that I've facilitated a little reunion here. And so I actually, if you two would like to ask each other questions about the books, we'll just watch. No, so let me bring in another caller. It's a well-known caller to all of us. Welcome to the show, Norm. How you doing tonight, Lancer? Good to see you, man.
Good evening, you too, Kristy. Very nice to meet you, my lady. And what's up, everyone in chat? I got two questions for you, Kristy, if you can. One is, how difficult or easy, I guess, I don't know which would be the right word to use, is it to let go or get rid of certain story arcs for the different characters, since there are like 10, 12, 15, I don't know, characters that have beginning, middle, end story arcs. And I just take one example. Morgase's story arc may not be entirely essential to the entire story, but it is essential and interwoven with her daughter.
Right.
So, how important is it to keep that story arc and yet still be true to the books, or to any main character story, or even Rand? And when he's not even in like 2 or 3 books, he's barely mentioned maybe in a couple of them. So that's my first question. And then my second question is, how much leeway or liberty, and Sarah might be able to answer this for us, how much liberty do the writers have to actually take word for word verbatim lines from the book? I think everyone in the world would love to hear Land say, death is lighter than a feather, but, duty is heavier than a mountain. We all want to hear that, or something, or sheep herder, with something of a really cool line. Or for me, it's clean. I just want to hear that and I'll be happy. So, but how much do we get to have, line for line verbatim, even a conversation straight from the book, pulled from the page and put it on the big screen? How much do you think they have liberty to do that? I'm going to sit back, raise my glass to you, Innkeeper, and my hat to you, milady, and sit back and listen. So thanks, guys. Take care.
Great questions.
Cool.
And I want to, so what I heard there was, from an adaptation standpoint, how important is it to lay out all the arcs and make sure you're not cutting an arc? Do you think about cutting later arcs because for the urgency now when you're thinking about this? And then that other question, how common is it to kind of pull dialogue in directly from the source material, or is that kind of a no-no from a writing perspective? Do you always want to come up with something of your own?
And those are great questions. So thanks, Norm, because that was really, really awesome. Super, super good questions. I'll answer question 2 first because it's going to be a little more brief. Yeah. But my understanding is when the electronic media rights were purchased from beginning of book 1 to end of book 14, basically, they have the creative liberty and ability to pull from anything in those 14 books, including direct dialogue, if they choose to. So there may be a moment in the writer's room where they're wanting to do a specific scene. And that's why it's fantastic to have somebody like Sarah there who she'll be able to quote it off the top of her head. They won't even have to open the book. But they do have creative license and liberty because they own the rights to those, the electronic media rights for those books. They can pull from them. They can use any character that's in those books. They can use any scene. They can pull direct dialogue if they want. So that might be a possibility. You may see it at some point. You may see a scene that you're like, God, I just want to see this dialogue. You might see it. It just depends on how the writer's room goes and how they feel and what they end up doing. So they do have that creative license to do that, an ability to do that. They do own those rights technically, essentially. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. And then as far as question 1, yes, I mean, it's got to be the hardest thing to do. It really does. I've had 2 experiences where I've adapted something, and one of them has been a short novella, short story, and then one of them has been a novel to a screenplay. So I've never necessarily done an episodic TV show in terms of adaptation, but I can tell you it's very, very troubling to know that you've got all these characters and you get to those moments where you're like, but if I cut this, what does that mean? And, but I love this, or I like this person, or I like this scene. It's challenging. It really is it's tough. It's really tough. But the important thing to remember is writers, they cut in layers. If they're going to cut, they cut in layers. And they take into account their vision for whatever like they want for season 1 or whatever's happening in that episode. They take into account what's going on with the motivation of the characters in each episode that season, where they've already mapped out where those characters are going, what's already set up for those conflicts. And they kind of take it piece by piece. And then they also loop in the subplots as they're going through that process. So then when they get to a moment where they know in the original content, this person is introduced, because they already have that vision and they already kind of know what they've already set up for those characters and the motivation and the direction that they're going, that's when they step back and they go, A, can we keep this character and just use it as a guest star for one episode? B, is it really going to further the narrative if we even put it in here? Do we need that person? Or how do we take from that and how do we loop it in already to maybe another character's dialogue that's already established? Or cut that scene and put it somewhere else, or the dialogue somewhere else, or that setup somewhere else. Then that way you're kind of cutting back and you're consolidating, essentially. Matt used that word the other day, which is really cool.
Yeah, consolidate. Yeah,
consolidate.
I should probably use that word more often in our keeper cut when we talked about. This brings up last week's episode when we talked about the Horn of Valir, but we won't go there.
Yeah, for sure. So that might not be the answer that you're looking for. It's just, I know for a fact that they kind of really just go in layers and in terms of, okay, let's break this down and then see the importance or the significance of this character.
Yeah, I love that idea of layers. That really helps me kind of envision that part of the process. So I really, that word kind of, but I kind of wondered, as far as, before we bring in Seth here to the show in just a second, I want to just ask this question. How deep would a series Bible like this go? I mean, how deep do series Bibles go? For example, we have thousands of characters in this book. Is it only secondary, tertiary? Like how far down the well do writers really, are they aware of all of the characters, or is it mostly series Bibles cover kind of like just what we'd think of your main characters?
And overall.
And overall, is it what's the tendency? Is there a tendency, or it just depends on what book it is or what series it is?
I've read series Bibles and even pitch decks that are about 20 pages, which is essentially before you even start a Bible, you have like what's called a pitch deck. So it's even a summary of the Bible. And I've seen supporting characters and I've seen minor characters outlined even in those. So again, it really truly is kind of just dependent on the vision that the showrunner and these writers have. And you will see those kind of like supporting characters and those minor characters if ultimately that character, even if they're only in 3 episodes, if they're important enough that they are furthering the narrative and furthering the story, you probably will see them outlined in that Bible. They will have some appearance, or there will be a mention of them because they're important and they're significant because they are moving the story along.
Okay, this goes out to the, I'm kind of wondering if the Innkeeper ended up in the Bible now. Now I'm wondering. He plays a key role in Towers of Midnight with Matrim when he goes to the inn. I'm just saying, the Dusty Wheel, that just furthers the narrative.
I don't know. I wish I'd seen the series Bible. I haven't seen it, so I don't know, Matt.
I'm surprised no one's asked that question yet. Okay, so let's bring Seth into the call. Hey Seth, welcome to the Dusty Wheel. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. It's raining here in Chicago, so I'm just trying to stay dry and smoky.
Excellent. By the way, thanks for waiting so long. Appreciate you holding on the line there. What's your question for Kristy?
Well, yeah. So I was wondering, let's say you've gone through a season, it's released, and everyone loves it. But cast-wise, there's one player, I won't name anyone, who just the cast hates, or the director just doesn't really get along with, and it's just they can't say. What does that look like behind the scenes? Like how do you kind of go about replacing someone?
Right.
That's a great question. I want to hear the answer to this.
Oh my gosh. If I knew the secret to that I would love to know that answer. All I can tell you is it really, again, just depends on how significant that character is. If you're talking a lead role and the show has already shown significant ratings and it's really successful and this character is essential to how this show goes, chances are you're probably not going to see that actor be replaced. The actor may choose to leave, That just happened recently on a DC show. So, and she was the whole crux of what the show was. So, it really does depend on kind of the importance and the significance of that character. I can't see them now, today. Maybe they would have done it a long time ago, but I can't see them now today where they would recast an actor for the same exact role. Other than like if it's Marvel and we're doing a Marvel movie versus a Marvel TV show, or a DC movie versus a DC show, and then it's two different actors playing the same role, which I hate, but whatever.
Yeah.
It really does depend on how significant and important that character is. And I haven't gotten to experience anything like that, essentially. So I'm not sure, how they go about that process. I know that there's probably meetings with agents and managers and, production and executive producers and directors talking about how they can kind of maneuver through these kind of issues and conflicts and getting along with other actors and crew members and cast on a show. But I've never actually been a part of that to where I can see what that looks like. I don't know if they schedule mediation sessions or counseling sessions. I have no idea. I really don't.
It's just like a normal management issue.
Yeah. I mean, I just know that there's some actors that have never even gotten along, and they've made, Sex and the City is one that just jumps out to me because Kim Cattrall and Sarah Jessica Parker did not get along, but they lasted 5 seasons together and the show was fantastic. So,
they could have brought in some of the traveling people. I mean, anything's possible.
Yeah, exactly. And that's true. Or they can just rewrite that character to be more minimal. Again, I can't see that happening with somebody like Perrin or Matt or Egwene, where you're just like, we're just going to minimize their character. I can't really see that happening, but that might. I don't know. I have no idea.
Oh my gosh, you're Seth. You're shaking the boat here for me. Like, oh man, if they replaced a main character, that would kill me. Hey, thank you very much for calling in, Seth. Really appreciate you holding on the line and for giving us a call and for watching tonight. Have a good evening. Okay.
Absolutely. You too. Thanks. Bye.
Yep. Bye bye. So we have 2 more callers, and then I have a couple more questions along this line. Let's bring in Carolina. Welcome to the Dusty Wheel. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Fantastic. I'm glad you called. So what's your question for Kristy?
Well, first, I just wanted to say this is such a cool episode. I'm a writer and director, and this is a real masterclass for me. So thank you for putting it together, Matt, and you, Kristy, for the insight. And then, so my question is, before the show got going, which character from your writer's perspective, Kristy, did you think would be the most difficult to adapt, and why?
That's a great question. Oh, that's fantastic. I probably would have to say Tom would be a challenging one.
Interesting.
Haddon Fane would be another one. And I'm thinking strictly just if we're going into season 1 and we're like, okay, we're going to probably do Eye of the World and The Great Hunt. Those would be the 2 that I would be like, these are going to be tough because these might be the ones that are on the chopping board. I'm not saying they are. I don't even know. But those would be the ones that I would think if they're going to cut somebody essentially from the beginning moving forward and figure out how to adapt it in a different way. Those might be the 2 that I would think would be a little more difficult to do. Also, I don't think we're going to see Min in the first season.
Wow. Okay.
I don't think we're going to see her. I think
drop that bomb.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that it's true. I don't know. I really don't. But don't be surprised if we don't see her, that she is a character that's introduced later.
So why? But tell me, I mean, I guess I can think about reasons from, just from my lay perspective of why that could be. But professionally speaking, why does Min come to mind as somebody that you think we might not see?
I think that she is just so minimal, particularly in Eye of the World. Yes, I know she's very important and significant, and there's an element and a story plot or a beat that she brings in that obviously comes into play later. But I feel like that they would think we can probably introduce this later, and that we're just going to make this some Joe Blow Schmo person and kind of adapt around it. I think that she's a big enough and important enough character that I would save her and introduce her a little bit later. That would be a choice that I would make as a writer. I would feel like, let's not introduce Min, let's hold on, and let's bring her in a different way or in a different element. later on, because
Sure.
she's in that one scene and then she's gone. Like, and we
Sure.
don't see her for what, 2-3 books? I can't even remember.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's what everyone I think is not accepted. We can see that, right? There's not a lot of screen time for that actor, and that comes down to that budget and how long do you contract that person in, and is it important that they get? I mean, but this goes back to a previous point you made, but I don't want to go down that road just yet. Carolina, is there someone that you have in mind that you think would be difficult to adapt, but someone you would like to, but would be difficult to adapt?
Oh wow, yeah, I think that actually mine maybe not. You wouldn't think it's difficult, but I actually think that before I knew it was Rosamund Pike being Moiraine, I found her to be like a really difficult character to adapt for writing, because a lot of the things she does is so subtle in her facial expressions and the way that she actually acts. And for a writer, like, it is often very, at least for me, is very challenging to not write what somebody is thinking, instead let them kind of bring that role to screen.
Yeah.
So as a writer, I would be nervous about how that would happen and what would happen, because you don't want it to become like, you know, this cheesy, like, face pulling sort of deal. But of course, Rosamund Pike won't do that.
Yeah.
Right. That's a great point. I'll probably want to dig into that. And so, you know, as you stick around, I want to hear Kristy's answer on this. Carolina, thank you so much for calling us and for asking your questions. And hopefully you'll give us another call next time. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a good night.
Absolutely. See you soon. All right.
Yeah, I just have to jump in. She brought up something that she was kind of, I maybe misunderstood her original question. She was coming from a perspective of knowing, being a writer and a director, is that how do you convey those elements of, say, somebody like Moiraine onto paper, which is a big no-no when it comes to writing. You'd be very surprised that we're not, as writers and as screenwriters, you know, we don't write on the actual page for the actor, then this is the look you give, and this is the way you feel.
Interesting.
You have to, there's a strong nuance and a very interesting way that you have to kind of set up the way you see a character and the way a character is portrayed. And I think that really just goes hand in hand with eventually the actor that ends up being cast in that part. So for somebody like Rosamund Pike to play Moiraine, I have no doubt that she's going to be able to nail those elements of those facial expressions and her portrayal of emotion on the outside and in the exterior versus the interior. I have no doubt she'll be able to do it. And it might just be something that when she read for it, it's like she had it. She just had that element where she understood the character as basic and just very toned down as a writer could write it, because, you know, writers just don't write that stuff. We don't write like, then she turns right and then she does this very look, and we don't write that. That's not in the script. It's not.
Well, yeah, and I don't know that I ever thought that you would, but I guess what you just said has me thinking something a little bit different, which is, and it's almost not justifying, but it's almost making sense of some of the speculation that some of the fans have, and, you know, some of these rumors we've heard. Basically what you're saying is, if you want them to do that, then you really have to give them the setting. You really have to give them, like, the event, if you will. Right. You have to give them the reason to get there. And often that would probably require adding something to an adaptation that doesn't exist, because the writer that's writing a book can just say, you know, she was angry or whatever. You know, she does this, and they can explain it, and they don't need an event or a reason for that actor to hold that emotion or to give something that clues in the viewer on what they're feeling. So I love that, and that really changes the dimension. Again, for me, I don't know anything about this, but that just in and of itself makes me believe that the adaptation will be even more different than I imagine it will be. I'm making space for that eventuality, because they have to translate some of that to the screen differently. Yeah. So let me bring on our last caller, Mike, to the show. Hey, Mike, welcome to the Dusty Wheel. How you doing tonight?
Oh, I am thrilled to be able to ask an expert a question of one of my favorite series. Thank you, Innkeeper, for putting it together. Thank you, Kristy, for being with us and helping us fans understand this. So my question is, so the One Power, and specifically Shadar, kind of has two parts to how how it works. You've got the end result, which is something that people like to talk about on screen, the fireballs, churning earth, fog, wind, all that kind of stuff. But then there's also the weaving of it. And as you know, only female channelers, they can see what other female channelers are weaving. And it's actually a pretty big part in the series. You have some duels where a man looking wouldn't necessarily see anything happening, but there's a huge things happening, explosive things that just don't come out until, you know, the end of the duel.
Right.
Would you keep that aspect of it and try to portray it on the screen, the weaving, or would you consider cutting that?
Personally, I would keep that. That's just me. I feel like it's such a significant and important part of our, even just the audiences, but our understanding of weaving or channeling and the one power. And I feel like it's one thing that's a little different than kind of all the other, you know, series and stuff out there where we see them doing magic and whatever and, you know, yada, yada. I feel like seeing those weaves really is what makes the Wheel of Time stick out and significant, because it brings to light what ultimately, you know, Robert Jordan was trying to do, which is explain how significant these thin lines of our existence and our being are important, and how they weave together, for lack of a better word, and how they work in conjunction with where we are, how important that is. So I would not cut that. I love being able to see those weaves. I think that would be something that the audience would feel like, wow, that's really cool. Like you can literally just pull out one little thread and see something that, you know, it's just magic. Yeah. I don't want to see that. I want the significance of what makes the Wheel of Time so different. And I think that's one element and one part of it that really makes it stand out is the magic system and how that magic system is structured and how it works between the genders. And I feel like that's I would not cut that. I would fight. That would be something that they say in the writer's room, there's things there are hills that you die on. You die on this hill, you die on that hill, something you have to let go, something you have to deal with. That would be one that if I was in the writer's room, I would fight for. And I would make sure my voice was known, because I really do feel like it is something that makes the Wheel of Time stand above the rest in terms of just the magic system and making it unique and significant.
So I'm just grinning from ear to ear hearing that.
I want to turn that question around to you, Mike. Would beyond just keeping it, does a visual way of communicating that we've come to mind with something you've seen before, or how would you like them to see? Are you thinking like, you know, I don't know why this comes to mind. I don't want to see them do this, but Avatar is in my head.
Okay.
You know, for kids. Is there something for you, Mike, that comes to mind where you're like, this is exactly how I imagine it, or I hope they do something completely? Are you hoping that we get something completely new, or something we've seen before that you kind of have in mind?
I think it's got to be something completely new. I think Kristy's absolutely right. This type of magic system, there's kind of physics to it. There's a logic to it. There's order to it. It makes sense.
There's a science to it, per se. There's a science. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. I feel like it's something that everyone's going to have to see from the outside. I don't think you can turn it into a viewpoint of another female channeler to see what's going on. I don't know how that would work. I've been racking my brain thinking about what it would look like, but that was going to be my follow-up question to Kristy. What do you envision? Because I can't wait to see what people with artistic skills do with this concept.
Yeah, I mean, I know and would prep myself for knowing it's obviously clearly going to be CGI. So we're going to see something along those lines. I think that they'll obviously bring on the most like badass, you know, special effects, visual effects, art direction people, those kinds of elements. I'm not doubting that Amazon has pulled out all the stops. They're going to make sure that it's not going to look, you know, cheesy or whatever. But it's interesting that you say that or ask that question, and I'm glad that you did, because first off, my daughter loves The Last Airbender. Like, she's just super obsessed with it. And so I kind of have caught glimpses of what she's watched, and I think it's really fascinating. Anyway, but I just finished watching DC's Legends of Tomorrow on the CW because I'm like obsessed with those shows. Anyway, this past season, what they did is they were talking about this overall story arc where one of the characters is one of the 3 Greek fades who controls how life is structured. And so for her, she's the weaver, and she is the one that controls everybody's weaves and how their lives are weaved together. And they did this really cool freaking scene. Oh my God, it was so awesome. Where she kind of is pulling out everybody's life thread but she's pulling out everybody's life thread. And I saw that and I thought, that's kind of what they need to do with the Wheel of Time, but not as kind of cheesy as they did. Yeah. That's what they need to do with the Wheel of Time. You really need to see, it was the way they shot it and the way it happened. It was so powerful to what was happening in the scene, because it showed how significant it was that everybody had this thread and where they fit in that timeline of life. And to see somebody's thread cut, or how everybody just kind of weaves together. It was really, really cool. I thought in my mind instantly, I was like, oh my God, that's what they need to do with the Wheel of Time, because that is really awesome.
I'm hoping it is something really unique. Hey,
yeah,
Mike, thank you so much for holding online and for calling in, and appreciate your question, man. Have a good evening. Okay.
Thank you both. Same to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's that. I kind of want to ask this question. That'll be probably all the calls for tonight, by the way. Thank you to all the callers. Great questions. It's always a lot of fun for me to be able to ask questions, and then for fans to jump in here. If you happen to still be with us, we'd love you to like the video, subscribe to the channel. You know what? I'll be honest. We're getting close to the end here, Kristy. We haven't covered nearly half the questions I had. And
Matt,
so I think,
you had a lot of questions.
I know. Well, maybe that's the point. I never run out of questions. So that's never going to happen. But we should probably do a series of these, have you come back. And now that fans have kind of gotten a taste of this, I kind of wanted this to be just ask a bunch of questions, see where things went. Now that they've gotten a taste of kind of this conversation, I hope to go collect, more detailed questions about this whole process, digging in here, and come back and almost even maybe we'll take a more narrow focus and really kind of dig into some of that experience and why you would imagine certain things one way or another. But I wanted to ask you about this budget, and special effects and how this works, right? When it comes to budgeting everything out, do they, as part of the production, is it season 1 has a budget? Season 2 has a budget? Is it an episode by episode budget? Is it, is it a minute by minute budget? How does this relationship work, between the people that have the money and give the money and provide that for a showrunner to kind of choose and such and make choices like that
and move forward? So they do start off with a season budget. So this is your budget for the season. And again, it really depends. Either all the episodes might already be written, or they may only be halfway through the season on written episodes, or they may have only written the pilot. And the distribution or production house or whatever, they feel like they're confident enough. No, we're just going to give you your full budget for your season. Go ahead and move forward. So it really depends on the show and what they're dealing with. But I can tell you, as you break down beneath that, where you've got a season budget and then you break down beneath that, yes, you are dealing with episode per episode in terms of budget. But that's when you have a really good crew and really good people that you bring on. And those are when you see credits on movie screens, that's when you're talking about assistant directors, unit production managers, all those levels of people that you see on, and you're thinking like, what the heck are all those credits for? Those are the people that come in even before you start shooting, and they break down a script. So they break down episode 1 and they figure out how many locations we're going to need, which actors are in it. And what we're going to need in terms of crew to film that particular scene, how long that scene will take to shoot, how many days, how many half days. Everything literally is broken down to the minute, hour, in terms of how they set up a budget for an episode. They do the same thing for a film, a screenplay. I just had to do a budget for a screenplay a couple months ago, and I was blown away when I sat down to kind of work with somebody else on working on a budget. And I was like, I did not realize it was even this intricate, but it really is. You down to the amount of people that you have to feed on set, and then you're putting in catering budget for the day. Those aspects are all part of how you break down. You take that season budget and then you filter it down to all those episodes. And that's how you kind of put your money into each episode.
How do you know though how much to keep for post-production? Like that seems like that must be a really tough choice to make. I mean, are you saving budget for post-production? Is post-production the budget that always gets kind of pulled from? It's just like, no, we need more budget for this episode. Or is there always kind of this, like, we have this much for special effects and everything in post that needs to happen? Yeah. That budget's kind of sacred.
You'd be surprised. Again, it really, I hate to say it just depends because that's such a vague answer. Sure. But that's when it's really important and significant to have all of your episodes written for a season, say. So then you've got a better idea what you're looking at in terms of post-production, particularly for each episode and what you're going to need special effects wise. I mean, in my mind, the pilot, I'm not saying that I know, but the pilot, which is basically Eamon's Village, like you're not going to need that much special effects for that. So you're not going to put as much in post on that particular breakdown as you would for upcoming episodes. It really is based on kind of what your episodes look like in terms of, what gets cut here and what gets put here and what gets put there. I can tell you they put a lot more into post-production than you think. They'll scrimp on production costs, honestly, if they can do everything in post. That is the running joke on any movie set, any TV set. You can ask anybody who's a filmmaker. The running joke is always, we'll fix it in post. We'll fix it in post. We'll do it in post. And then they won't do it on set. They don't do a practical special effect, which probably would save money and cost less than actually doing it in post. Yeah. But no, I can't begin to tell you how many times we've heard like, we're just running out of time to shoot this. We'll just fix it in post. And that a lot of that money is put into post for that reason. It costs more to do it in post for sure.
And that's a really interesting view of this, which is, in my head, it would be like, no, we got to take money because that's the thing that has to happen still. But it's interesting you're saying that's like, no, fix it in post is a thing. And that makes more sense now. I've heard that before, but it makes more sense to me. I'm kind of curious. Now, like I said, I wanted to get into, sets and locations and how when to go, soundstage or not on soundstage.
Right.
How do you establish, the continuity of, because that's one of the other questions I want to ask for next time. I want to talk through this idea of they had to end right early. They had to leave because of, what happened.
COVID. COVID. Yeah.
And sorry, I was trying to avoid it, but I don't know if YouTube has an issue about that word anymore. But
spoilers.
Spoilers,
there's the pandemic.
they had 2 more episodes left. And
I think so. Yeah, they
sorry. At least from what was reported, what was reported out there. That's not official, I don't think, but they had. We thought there remained 2 more to go, and so this idea of they had locations before where they were shooting.
Sure.
Well, how do you make that continuity work? And we won't try to cover that right now, but yes, the continuity question. I'm kind of curious if you have some opinions there. Actor contracts. We were going to talk about first unit, second unit. I have no idea what that means, but next time.
See, we have a whole nother episode to do.
We have Sarah in chat just said, I'm trying to think of above the line people. I have no idea what that means either. Maybe I'll have to go back and watch.
Yeah, she nailed it. She brought that up.
she's answering some questions in chat. That's gonna be fun for those of you who are watching. If you're watching this and you don't watch. You need to go do the chat replay afterwards. I think you have to do both of these because you're going to get a lot of information from that. So, there's a lot of questions I'd still like to ask. We'll ask fans afterwards all about what else they would like to know. Maybe next time we'll bring another guest on with you, and we'll just keep on this series of discussions about real adaptations and how they work, and
actually production of the actual show, like just all those like technical elements. I think that's really fascinating to talk about as well. That really puts the fans at ease when they know certain things, I think.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm kind of curious, again, for those of you that are watching in chat, Facebook, Twitter, send us a note across social media, whether or not it's whatever, anywhere you can find us. What else would you like to talk about with Kristy and other professionals about, creating a TV series like this and adapting a book? We'd love to do more shows just like this. Again, Kristy, thank you so much for showing up.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
I've had a blast. It's awesome.
This isn't Looney Theories. That's normally normally we're getting together for a panel on Looney Theories at least once a year, and we've already done that this year. So
and we're talking about something that I feel a little more confident in talking about. Wheel of Time. Like, you don't understand how intimidating it is to sit like next to you and Sarah and like 5 other people, and I'm like, I thought I knew these books, but I don't know them as well as they do. So I can actually answer these questions, which is awesome.
Yeah, I love it. I love being the dummy in the room. I love that aspect of this of the show today. It's great. And again, if you're here and you're still watching, appreciate you liking the video for future viewers and subscribing to the channel. And we'll be back again with Kristy. We'll do this again. And hey, we made it. Taylor wasn't here. Taylor wasn't here.
Awesome.
He wasn't even in chat, which he could have been in chat. I'm going to have to talk to him about that afterwards. He wasn't here. The show happened, and so that's fantastic too. For those of you that are here, we do have a Discord channel. You can find it in the description of the video. If you want to talk afterwards, we meet up in the Discord channel and just keep these conversations going. It's a lot of fun. I jump in there most days after the show, 20, 30 minutes later, and continue conversing about this. So if you want to do that, feel free to do that. And again, be back here on Saturday if you want to talk about sex, or at least hear other people talk about it.
I missed that invite. Like, I'll talk about sex. That's fine.
Right. That'll be also a series. We'll do a series of sex episodes. That's right. That sounds strange. Well, again, thank you for being here. Really appreciate that. And we'll see if this works. As we say, good night from the Dusty Wheel and smash to black.
If you want news and rumors that appeal, welcome to the Dusty Wheel.